Welcome to the Education Marketing Leader podcast with Chris Raposo. If you're looking to dive into the latest industry insights, draw inspiration from education success stories, or just want to sharpen your marketing skills, you're in the right place. Here, we bring you a diverse range of voices from experts and leaders in the field, offering you a unique blend of professional development and practical strategies. Whether you want to understand your audience better, stay updated with the latest tech trends in marketing, or expand your professional network, we've got you covered. So while you're driving on your morning commute or winding down after a busy day, let's explore the dynamic world of education marketing together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Education Marketing Leader with Chris Raposo. Today, my guest is joining me from the great state of Texas, the Lone Star State. Her name is Melanie Lindahl, and she is the Senior UX and Web Designer and Developer at the University of Texas at Austin. Melanie, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So Melanie presented at the HighEdWeb Annual Conference last month in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I watched her presentation and I thought she did phenomenal. She had that big Texas confidence during the presentation and totally took over the room, and everybody was just enthralled with her presentation. It was informative, it was insightful, and it was very fun at certain points. And we'll talk about that a little bit more today. And she won the Red Stapler Award and Best in Sessions at the HighEdWeb Conference. So
right there,
yes.
right there.
So if you're watching, yes, she cleaned up at the conference. So when I saw her, I immediately approached her. I knew it was a hit before she even got the trophies, and I invited her on the podcast, and I'm glad that she agreed to do so. Yeah. And today we will talk about her presentation on budget-friendly UX strategies for higher education. And even if you're not at higher education, you still can get a lot out of it on how to do the user-friendly design there. So Melanie, again, thank you so much for being here. Big congrats. Now, can you give us a quick rundown on your presentation, because I just raved about it? What made you tackle UX research and with a tight budget for higher websites, and why did you decide to present it during that conference?
So rundown of the session. So I kind of stepped through project phases and the UX work that I do kind of commonly do at each phase. I couldn't cover everything. I really wanted to. I talked about where I do it, how I do it, how much time do I spend, because that's something I feel like people don't talk enough about. How much money do I spend, because it's not really that much, so everyone can do this, right? And then at the end, we went through like a breakdown of how UX is cheaper than not doing anything. Or what made me tackle this? Well, I mean, EDU budgets are always small or completely non-existent. But the UX work is still incredibly important. And I'm trying to get more folks to add even small amounts of the UX to their workflow. And I wanted people to leave my session with something tangible, that they could have at least one thing that they could go home and they could do. And people did tell me afterwards, like, oh, I have something I can go do. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what the point was. So thank you for telling me that.
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, very informative. And I thought that how you presented it with the little, how much does each part of the design phase cost? You had like little ducks there that indicated how much money it would cost, and that was a nice way to put that into people's minds. So this costs one duck, maybe a box of donuts or something like that. We talked a lot about donuts and how to sway students to participate in some of these studies. The other part that you said, that when you said higher education budget is usually very small, especially for marketing. And you being from the University of Texas at Austin, big school, well recognized, some people may think you have all the money in the world to spend on the website, but that is not the case, as you've just mentioned. And that's really encouraging for smaller schools, like private small schools or even community colleges, to know that you don't have to have a lot of resources in order to make a bigger impact on the user experience. How do you make the case for investing in UX research right from the start when you bring that up to leadership, especially when working with limited funds?
It's hard. I can't say like it's not hard,
Mhm.
but I've had to show that importance of this kind of work in a couple of different departments on campus now. Once you start having success with UX, then the leadership begins to understand, I feel like fairly quickly, how much it adds to not only the user experience, but also to their business goals. So I suggest understanding what particular business need or goal that you might be able to work on, and then show how the UX can support that. Yeah, I would say that's probably what I would do.
Yeah, and I know you did you did some sort of a research case study on the University of Texas Law School a while ago, and you nicely presented it how UX design helps the overall user experience. You want to talk about the modern filter panel a little bit?
Oh, God, we had so many case studies. So the filter panel, that was part of our early registration project.
Mm.
It was kind of this big thing, and we had to rebuild a registration tool because it was in like this really old code and bleh. And we learned so many things from talking to users. I went over a couple of those in my session. The filter panel was a really kind of a fun, I mean, you don't get to build filter panels very much, right? And it was kind of a fun little offshoot that we got to do because we had to rebuild the course schedule, right? Because that is part of that registration process. The students look at that constantly for like 2 weeks and then they go register. And
Mm.
so the filter panel was a fun one. We did testing on it. We did a lot of research and looked at a lot of examples and kind of figured out, oh, we want to make sure people have to click something and not hover because hover can be really weird and sticky and messy. And yeah, we really figured out how, well, one of the things was there's a lot of filters and
Mhm.
what filters do you put on there? So we talked to the students a lot and figured out, how they kind of want to grind down and filter into those classes because we have a lot of range of law topics at the law school, and I found that it can be difficult for some of the students to just kind of figure out which direction they want to go. And we have all these topics. What do I want to take next semester? So yeah, talking to them was really fun, and then just doing the research on the technical aspect of it was really fun too.
Yeah, and what was the sample size for that? How many students do you remember you surveyed
No,
and
I
worked with?
don't.
Okay, that's fine.
Send it out. We have about 1,000 students total.
Mhm.
Um, and in quantitative, I would say if you can get more than 80, you're doing pretty well. So we usually get about that, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, but the end result looked like that 99% of the people that were surveyed found the new filter panel to be understandable. So that's always a win
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
get that, because just knowing that what you've done had a positive impact, gets you encouraged for the next thing and, further drill down and make sure that everybody in the school gets that same
Yeah.
experience that's positively impacts them. Now, you mentioned some inexpensive ways to gather user data. We talked donuts earlier. What are some of the go-to methods that you found that actually work without requiring a whole chunk of the budget?
Yeah. So, like in my session, I talked about there's a lot of things you can do. They actually really don't take that much of your time, and they may not even take a lot of money. I buy donuts. The students like the donuts, but I think surveys actually at the beginning of your project are really underestimated. I have found that the data I get from a survey sets our product goals. Top task surveys you can include in there are full of this vital information from your users, and it tells you, what does your product really need to do? Like, what are people going to come here to do? We need to make sure they can do those things. And so it's like this crazy important information, so that we aren't relying on our assumptions of like how would students want to use a filter panel, right? I also really like to do quick user testing for like when I'm designing and we're having trouble deciding on something, or really just kind of aren't sure where to put the secondary menu. So we do a lot of research, but then we just have to test it.
Mhm.
And yeah, that stuff is phenomenally helpful as early as you can get it in that design phase, so that you aren't just continuing to work on a design that ends up not actually being the thing that you need to do.
Right. And in the end, it's not what you want, right? It's what the end user wants and what the end user can benefit from. I utilize a similar strategy when I write research papers and white papers for our organization. I usually put the table of contents together and I run it by 4 or 5 experts in the field.
Okay.
Run it by them, ask them, hey, is this something that you as a reader or as a consumer would actually find beneficial? What in there, what is missing or what
Mhm.
should be taken out, that sort of thing, right? Because it takes a lot of research, a lot of time to go into the research phase. And the last thing that we want is come out with a product that nobody wants.
I know. If they're not going to use it, why did we do it in the first place, you know?
Exactly,
That's
exactly.
what I fear most people are, or not most people, a lot of people do, is they build something and yeah, it's great, but it's not actually really useful for the person using it, so
Yes.
they're going to find a way around it.
Yeah, it's like the field of dreams, right? If we build it, they will
Yeah.
come. It's not usually what's happening, and we've seen that everywhere in our lives. And whether it's a product, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a movie, some of these things they flop,
Yeah.
and people think that's the best things since the invention of the wheel, but it's not. If nobody wants it,
Yeah.
um, I've talked to a lot of higher ed marketers, higher web people. Some of them are one-man shows in the marketing department. They're so small. So for schools without a dedicated UX professional on board, what advice would you give to them for sneaking in some UX practices into
Hmm.
their overall workflow? They're already busy, but it's still important to have UX.
Yeah. Yeah. I laugh a little bit because this one, I'm unsure if it's advice, if it's good advice. But honestly, I don't ask for permission. I stopped asking for permission. I just say, I'm going to do this work and I'm excited to give you the results and see what we found. It's less sneaky because you're just giving a heads up, but you're absolutely not asking anyone for permission. And in my opinion, you don't have to get permission, because this is the process for a successful product, doing the UX work. So it's less about sneaking it and more about just knowing its importance and doing it because it's part of the process.
That's right. It's a good way to avoid the red tape in higher education as well, because if you wait for permission, it runs by a couple of committees, by next year it's still not started. So it's a good way to go about it and ask for forgiveness. Then
Yes, it's probably not wonderful advice. Maybe somebody will get in trouble, but I I don't know. I haven't had a problem. Maybe I'm doing it.
well,
Um,
at least do it once, see how it goes. And if it's a complete
yeah,
disaster and you get
yeah,
on a pip, then may as well
yeah,
revisit that and ask again. But it's what I've learned too. You save a lot of time for yourself and for your end users when you just do what you believe as the expert is the right thing to do for the organization as a whole and the people that are visiting your website.
yeah.
And if it's fruitful, then you're the hero, hopefully.
Yeah, and I get it's kind of not scary, but when you're just starting out, like I was there, um
Mhm.
I I I don't know, you just have to do it. It's kind of like I asked somebody when I wanted to kind of get into this field, like I cold emailed people. I was like, I want to do what you do. How did you get here? And I would talk to people at South by Southwest Interactive, like, I want to be you. How do I do that? And they were kind of like, you just do it and then say you're a UX designer. I'm like, oh, great. So you just start doing it and then you're that.
That's awesome advice. I love that. That's how I started with this podcast. I had a lot of people that I listened to podcasts to. I thought, how cool is this? And I asked them, I was like, just record it, and then figure out along the way. And now I'm almost 100 episodes in. So
There you go.
yeah, it's just you just gotta start. Don't overthink it. Just go for it. And you don't fail. You learn something. Either you learn it's for you or you learn it's not for you. But dreaming about it for years and years, and never acting on it is something that'll leave you with regret at the end of your life.
Yeah.
Now, I referred to duckbills earlier, which I really
Okay.
love. I should probably get your slides and put it up here
Show
during the
it. Yeah. What are we
conversation.
talking about? Yeah.
Yes, yes. But can you share some of the stories where one of your budget-friendly UX approaches really made a difference in a project? I'm sure somebody would like to get a takeaway here right now.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I have a lot. I feel like we have a lot of
Yeah.
success all the time. So one that was, I was thinking about this, one that wasn't in my session, so you'll have a new story. We were building a new online like dashboard system that follows a person from the time they apply with their application, and then they get admitted, and then they become a current student, and then they graduate. So it's like one URL for the whole time that they're involved with the law school. And from other UX research we had done, we knew that we needed some kind of like checklist for important to-do items, not only for the applicants to complete their application, like, hey, you're still missing your, letter of recommendation, but also for the current students to say, hey, you have this bar and it's going to prevent your registration. Please go clear this bar. Don't forget to please, like, here's the deadline to pay your tuition. Your classes are about to get canceled. So we talked to users about how do you like to use checklists? I mean, I feel like that's such a basic thing, right?
Mhm.
Turns out it's not. So we found out that some people wanted all checklist items to be visible, whether they were completed or not. They love to see the checked off stuff. I think I might be that person too. Then we found out that other users wanted anything completed to be gone forever. I never want to see that checklist item again. And then there was other people who were kind of in between. They're like, well, I want that completed checklist items to be gone. Like, I don't want to see it, but I need to reference it. So we ended up building a checklist where you can keep everything visible, which is kind of the default, or you can move items to a section called dismissed items. And it's just an accordion panel. You can open it up, you can see it, you can never see it again. It's whatever you want to do. So that just that tiny little part of this bigger tool was based on our users' preferences and allows them to use it, however is best for them. So that was a fun one that we got to kind of fiddle around with and do some very specific user testing for.
Yeah. Personalization for the win again.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to do sometimes. We've talked about personalization more and more, and it's like, oh, there's certain things there's certain information we just don't want to keep on people. Like we want to be good stewards of personal data, and maybe we just don't need that data. So we're still kind of trying to figure that out.
Right, right. But when it comes to preferences, it's nice to personalize it for the people that want to see everything, all the checked off list, the ones that don't want to ever see it again, and the ones that may want to refer back to it and have it in an accordion. So I think that's really beneficial, to just give everybody that ease of mind, because today is mental health day as well as we record this, and some people they just like to get overwhelmed with certain things, right? And they're like, just get it off my plate. I don't want to see it again. And other people are like, oh my gosh, did I do this? Like, let me refer back to it. And that's how I am. I don't necessarily need to see it there, but I need to go back and just double check, did I actually do
Yeah,
this? What am I missing? And
yeah.
I'm also the kind of person that if I have a checklist and I've completed something before I created a checklist, I put it on there so I can check it off.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Who doesn't do that? I want more checked off things. What else? I got up today. Yes, let's put that on there.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Now we talked about successes. Let's talk about some myths that are out there. What are some of the biggest myths regarding UX design in higher education that you've run into, and how do you usually bust those myths?
hmm I don't know if it's exclusive to higher ed, but I know I used to think that UX had to involve things like eye tracking software. That's expensive. I have
Mhm.
never used anything expensive, and I've had lots of success. So you don't have to spend money. Using what you have can be just as good as a fancy tool. It's more about how you're doing the work and how you're thinking about it and how you structure your testing or your activities. Um, and I also used to think that UX is hard, and it's not. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that because like my job's important, but no, anytime you have a question about your users, ask them. If you have a question like, is our product working properly? Test it, do a little UX activity. This don't have to be big things, right? I think that's what that used to make me feel like it was a big thing. It's like I see the whole picture and I'm not dividing it up well. But I feel like one myth in general is that UX is like an add-on feature to a product or a project, and it's not true. It's needed for all projects from the beginning. Is giving users, well, I'll say giving users what we think that they need, or even worse, giving them only what we want them to have is not okay. So you really have to always be doing this work from the beginning. It's kind
Yeah.
of like, if you're baking a cookie, you're baking a chocolate chip cookie and you didn't put the chocolate chips in when you baked it, and so now you've let them cool down, they're baked, they're cooled, and now we're shoving in chocolate chips trying not to break the cookie. That's what doing it at the end is like. So it's really not an add-on feature, it's part of the process.
Yeah. I like that. Some people that have never done it before, it doesn't matter what it is. Sometimes it becomes such a big deal and you talk it up and you avoid it so long and you know it needs to be done, but you think it's hard. So you're putting it off. And then it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And once you finally decide to dive into it, it isn't actually that hard, right? And you're thinking to yourself, I wasted so much time worrying about this monster that I created in my head. I wish I would have done it sooner, so I would have gotten other things that would have been further down that
Yes.
rabbit hole of UX design and given my users and my visitors a better experience, because in the end it's for them again, right? And it's why we're in this business of whether it's in higher education, if it's in marketing or communications, is to serve the end users, to help them get to the end point, not because we want to sell something and collect tuition money, but it's more about setting somebody else up for life in general. And if we
Well,
can do it,
yes. I'm
yeah,
sorry, I'll interrupt. UX can be for the business too. Like
yes.
it can drive people to our goals as well.
Mhm.
However, you are absolutely correct that the purpose of this is to make sure they can get done what they need to get done. Do we need them to do something? Cool. Make sure they can get that done too. Like these kind of things become a marriage
Yes.
proposal, right? And you
Yes.
finalize it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it has to be mutually beneficial, obviously, because if we can't get somebody in, we can't keep the lights on, we can't provide the service
Yeah.
that somebody needs to better themselves. So now there may be a lot of different things that somebody can take care of when it comes to the website. How do you decide what to test first on a website or a project when you get this project started for UX?
Right. So testing is important, but more
Mhm.
importantly, please just get some UX work done at the beginning and the middle and the end. This makes sure that you start off correctly and you continue on a good path. And then you're testing it at the end to make sure like you did the right thing, and there's always stuff to fix at the end, but it shouldn't be super huge. You shouldn't be having revelations at the end of the project if you're doing this throughout the whole thing. So where do you start? So from the beginning, a survey. I can't go back to that enough. Figuring out what questions do we have about what we're doing? What are we even doing? Use a survey. Figure that out with your users. When you're designing, test something to make sure you have things in the right space for the tasks that the users are doing. Then
Mhm.
after you've built it, test the darn thing to make sure that those bugs are taken care of and that they can efficiently get to that content or complete that task. Like the people's time is money. Their time is money, and so we want to make sure they get it efficiently and effectively, and it's easy and it's awesome.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. How do you deal with the naysayers when it comes to UX on a website? Now, obviously, we talked about it earlier. You don't like to ask for permission. You want to get it done. You're going to go straight forward and then just, you know, uh, report on the results afterwards. So, but let's say you have somebody there, you say, hey, I'm going to do this. And then you have someone who's, two pay grades higher, and you say, absolutely not, Melanie. We're not doing this. We don't have the money for it. How do you convince them
Yeah.
to keep an open mind?
Mm-hmm. Um, so I find what's important. I try to find what's important for them and show the benefits. And then I put this in my session, like you can actually show with actual dollar amounts that doing UX is cheaper in the long run. It saves tons of money on additional meetings, post-launch work. It's your money and your time. It's also your users' money and your users' time. And so the whole shoehorning chocolate chips into a cookie, that's a good, any kind of metaphor like that where you're shoehorning anything is good because you end up spending so less time just doing the product correctly from the start instead of having a product that had no feedback from any user whatsoever, and then you get to it and you launch it and it's kind of garbage, or it did not meet the needs of the users at all, or barely, or minimally, and people are having so much trouble with it. I think of a lot of like third-party products out there that we have floating around campus, and some of them really hit the mark and some of them don't. And I'm not really sure why that is. That's not my field, but yeah, so it's so for the naysayers, I try to find something that is meaningful to them that will help them. Like, even if it's like, hey, do you want to be in 5 extra meetings this month? Because that's what it's going to be if you don't just let me go do this thing that takes me 5 hours and not you 5 hours, you know? So trying to cater to whomever is making the decision that's probably the thing I would recommend.
Okay, that is smart. Always tie it back to the money, as we see in B2B, when we have to try to convince the CEO to invest in something. So,
and it's so small. It's such a small amount of money and a small amount of my time compared to the larger picture, right? It doesn't take much.
It does not take much, as we've learned here today, as we learned during your presentation as well. Now, what are some small, quick tweaks for better to get the biggest UX bang for your buck, for the time invested? Like, somebody's coming in, okay, I need to change something right now. Because of the naysayers, I have to show them something right away.
Okay.
And then get the success, and you can build on that success.
Okay. So honestly, research, in my opinion, is the best thing, because like if I do a top task survey at the beginning of a project, that shows them what people like, what do we need to be doing with this product that we're building. That is like a very tangible thing I can show them. It will pave the path for the product right from the beginning, so you start off well, and then it guides your product requirements. I reference those tasks so much throughout the project. I use them for personas and journey mapping and user testing later on. So that is a top task survey, or like a top task analysis, is something that you can do at the beginning, and it actually has impact for the whole project.
Awesome. Love that advice. Thank you for that. Now, you talked earlier that you don't use expensive tools like eye tracking when you go through the research phase. Are there any tools out there that you're actually using, or do you solely rely on the surveys?
Well, it's not just surveys. It's more just, it's the human computer interaction, right? It's the human part that I do really well. It's it's surveys, but it's chatting, literally talking with people, doing interviews. Honestly, talking with users about their pain points is a big one. If you can get to understand a big pain point for them, and you can figure out how to fix it for them, that's a huge win. And for not just that one person, for all the people having that same pain point. So I haven't, like I said, I don't use tools. I mean, there's plenty of tools out there. EDU doesn't typically have the budget for a lot of tooling, so that's why I've just kind of figured out how to do it without it. It probably takes maybe a little, like, oh, maybe I have to do 2 UX activities that are minimal instead of this one thing that costs more money. That's fine with me. I like talking with people. I love testing. Testing is so much fun. So yeah, so no, not a nerdy answer. It's not technical.
How about artificial intelligence? You use it at all? AI?
Not yet. So it's so new, right? So I have some qualms about it. I learned at HighEdWeb that a really good idea that I'm a little apprehensive about. Somebody said, oh, I'm having AI like ChatGPT create a persona for me. I feed it data, it creates a persona, and then I'm asking it questions as if it were that persona. And that seems really helpful, but I would want to make sure that, how do you say it? Like, it's creating itself and then it's telling me what it wants, like it's feeding its own self. So that can be tricky. Personas can be tricky to create anyway. And so AI is something I probably will start to use for reporting to help move that process, like make me more quick, right? To move that reporting process along, because I have deliverables and things I do after each thing activity that I do with users. But it's not happening yet, but it is something I'm exploring. But it's so new. Like, I feel like if anyone's doing it right now, I'm like, what? Have you not been doing anything else? Because I feel like that's like a ton of time to dedicate to like figuring out how you're going to use AI for this job. But
That's good.
I don't know.
Well, I highly recommend Brian Piper's presentation at HighEdWeb. There was on
Oh,
AI and some of
yeah.
the tools. So I watched that as well. So when it comes out on demand, I would highly recommend you watch it just
It
to
might
see
be
what's,
out.
what's out there. Perplexity is one of those tools that I use for research. It
Okay.
actually gives you the citation of where they got the information from, so you can double check and prove the work.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Yes, I have several HighEdWeb sessions I need to go back and watch because I couldn't obviously make them all. And um,
yes.
so yeah, I will take that note.
Awesome. Melanie, thank you very much for your time today. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you or UX?
I'm finally on LinkedIn. It took a long time. So you can find me there. Yay.
Yes, I will tag you in the recap for
Okay.
sure. Well, thank you again. Really insightful episode. I will release this in a couple of weeks. Tag you, make sure that everybody can find you, and then also spotlight again one more time the awards that she won for the presentation. So thank you, Melanie. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks. You too. I appreciate it very much.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning into the show today. If you enjoyed it, don't keep it to yourself. Share with your friends in your network. And if you have a moment, I would really appreciate a review of the podcast. That'll help other people find the show as well. Tune in every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. when I release another episode. Take care now. Have a good one, friends.